Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on CMMC 2.0 and Executive Summary. My name is Jack Ardrey, and I'll be moderating today's program. This program is brought to you by Charles IT, Connecticut's compliance experts. We want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded, so all attendee lines are muted, and the presentation will send the recording to the attendees afterwards, along with a copy of the presentation. So this webinar will be a presentation followed by a Q&A where Foster will answer any questions that any of you might have. You can submit your questions via the Q&A button on your screen during the presentation. And it is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Foster Charles.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Foster Charles, and the Charles IT, again, we are a compliance-focused IT company, and so we have locations in Middletown and Stamford, and we have 64 full-time team members that are focusing on highly regulated industries and providing exceptional service to our clients. A little bit about me. I founded Charles IT basically in 2006 when I was still in high school. I started all like home users and small businesses. The organization grew, and then we got really focused into manufacturing and healthcare. And we found that our favorite clients and best clients were all under a compliance. And so because of that, we started niching more and more into compliance, and we really started focusing on anybody that needed regulatory help. So whether they're doing a SOC 2, ITAR, CMMC, HIPAA, anything like that, that's really where we became a major focus on. So today we're here to talk about CMMC. What the heck is CMMC? I'm going to give a little bit of quick background and everything about it. Basically, for anybody who doesn't know, it was in 2016, long before CMMC came out, defense contractors were basically required to implement what they call NIST 800-171 controls. Some people know it by that. Other people were figured out later on that there was contracts clauses called DFARS. And basically, as of like January 1, 2017, the defense industry base was required to follow these DFARS rules. Well, because contractor implementation of the requirements was so sporadic, the DoD basically reiterated those requirements and then released that set of requirements for DFARS and said, hey, you have to do this again in 2020. So CMMC was first announced basically in 2019 by the Department of Defense. It was aimed to provide more secure framework for any DoD manufacturers. And what's interesting about it is that they didn't think it was a big leap. They assumed that everybody was actually already compliant because they came out in 2016 and said, hey, everybody should be doing this. DFARS came out in 2017 saying, hey, you must do this and you must self-assess and say you're doing this. And everybody's going, yep, check, we got it, we're doing it, of course. So they didn't think it was a major lift. And now where we are today is after months of internal study, the DoD announced basically in November 21, CMMC level 2 or 2.0, the second iteration. That new update is basically aimed to improve the strategic line of thinking for CMMC, clean things up, remove confusion. And so they're modifying and expanding the program while trying to simplify many of the frameworks or the confusing parts of it. And there's 8 major focuses with this new update. So I'm going to go ahead and dig right in. The focus of CMMC really was about making sure that there was clarity in what was expected. So basically, anywhere there's transformation of CUI or FCI, and that's controlled unclassified information, which is really a lot of the main focus. And they didn't really have a ton of visibility beyond that. And so what they wanted to focus on is that they were doing a lot of other things and it lacked a true focus of what they were trying to accomplish. So the first thing they came out with, it was saying, okay, we want to make sure that we're maintaining and improving the security profiles of the organizations handling the sensitive information. And CMMC level 2.0, I keep saying level 2, we'll talk about that in a minute, are structured with a huge emphasis on the protection of the information deemed vital to national security. That is really what this is all about. Control. unclassified but controlled unclassified information is the most important. And that's really what they wanted to make sure everything was truly focusing on, and how to do that with the least level of complexity. So the other thing they were trying to do is clarity. It was confusing. So many contractors and suppliers found CMMC levels 2 and 4, like what the heck are those things? In actuality, it didn't serve much purpose in setting any security standards. They never released what those things were, and DoD insiders basically viewed those levels as just transitional levels for organizations going from level 1 to level 3 and level 5, which is really what they wanted people to get to. But okay, you're level 1, but you're not level 3, so we're putting you at level 2, and they were made to be transitional levels. Well, that just confused the heck out of everybody. So CMMC 2.0 is basically shifting to 3 levels rather than 5. The 3 actual levels they want: level 1, level 3, and level 5, in what the first iteration of CMMC was. Now it's just level 1, 2, and 3. Just to get a little confusing, they left that confusion in there. So old CMMC level 3 is now really CMMC level 2 on 2.0. So that's the last level of confusion that they left behind for everybody. But really what they're trying to do is 1, 2, and 3. So level 1 is basically what they call foundations. You'll hear me say a foundational level, and that applies to companies that process, store, or handle FCI, which is federal contract information. And basically, in DoD, that will companies to perform self-assessments towards that information when they're on level 1. And that FCI is really information that's not intended for public consumption, and it's more provided by or generated for the government under the contract. So the contract information, the schematics, the idea of what the actual contract might be would be considered FCI. And it could be anything to develop or deliver a product or service to the government. And so that's really FCI. And that's actually, like, if you listen to one of my previous webinars about like the gotchas to it, a lot of people forget about FCI. It's actually still controlled information. So don't forget about that. And removing the other main thing in the alignment here was, and I might touch on this later, but what I want to make sure people know is that they removed all these levels, but they also removed a lot of the maturity processes from CMMC. The maturity processes was probably the biggest beef that everybody had with it, is that you had to prove that you were actually being mature in moving all these things forward. And as a part of that, it was poorly defined. And after a year of full release of CMMC level, like the first rendition of it, the DoD never really provided what passing policy was. And so to further align everything, they got rid of all this, and it was forcing people to do all these like step-by-step insane instructions for each assessment. And what actually the outcome was is that people that were the actual assessors that had that information and had the training and were being certified to do the assessments were failing themselves. And that forced them really to double back and look at it. And it was the #1 reason for what they call C3PAOs to fail their CMMC assessment. And it was a big like thing in the October town hall meeting that they went through. But random fun fact there, it was really about getting the clarity to all those items. The key part for it really is the alignment. So knowing that level 1, 3, and 5, the alignment of what the heck you're actually trying to comply to. CMMC was its own little like substandard of information. Levels 2 and 4 were completely unique to CMMC, so that's why they got rid of them. And really what level 1, 2, and 3 are staying the same, but they're based on core information. So the foundation level, which it will also require companies to comply with like a limited subset of NIST's 800-171 controls. Those are like the basics that need to be there. Like you gotta have antivirus, you have to have updates, you have to have basic, not gross negligence any business should be doing, right? And those things are at level 1. Level 2, which used to be level 3, for those keeping track at home, level 2 is where most people are gonna fall, and that's the advanced level. And businesses should expect to be fully compliant with 800-171 requirements. They got rid of these extra little fringe things that were just CMMC specific and really said, okay, If you're level 2, you should be 800, 171. NIST 800, 171 controls should be followed. Bam, that's it. And then expert level, which they call level 3, is contractors are required to comply with NIST 800, 172, which is basically the 800, 171 plus additional controls that they added on. And it's really for advanced maturity and advanced security. You're going to be doing top secret or highly sensitive information. Most people will land in the level 2 alignment. But really, the important thing to know is level 1 is this base standard controls that are accepted in business practice. Level 2 is 800, 171. Level 3 is 800, 172. So that was the alignment. They got rid of all the custom CMMC stuff and brought it there. The other major beef, this is what probably a lot of people on those webinar are talking about, cost. Holy cow, this thing's expensive. We can't implement this. Like the assessments every single year, like it got crazy, and we had to implement it freaking perfectly in order to get that level of certification. It was unreasonable. So in comparison to CMMC 1 and 2, 2 is far less costly. That's because the assessment requirements were reduced or completely removed. So the level 1 requirements and assessments are basically going to go away. Level 2, there's going to be some stuff that we'll talk about in the next page here, and level 3 will require government people to kind of go and get assessed. They eliminated all the engineering and assessment costs really related with levels 1, 2, and 4 of the original CMMC. And the DoD also eliminated the CMMC specific approaches. So anybody who's been following the right standards back in 2016, 2017, doing to FARs 800, 171, what the government is already expecting everybody to follow, you're already compliant. You should have been doing this a long time ago, so you should be good, and they got rid of anything custom. So if you've been following it now and you've been doing what you're supposed to, great, no problem. This won't be a tremendous cost to you, and you don't have to get specific CMMC items covered onto it. And then of course the cost for level 1 people, you can self-assess. That brings me to assessments. So the assessments is the big thing that one needs more clarity, I think, and people need to make sure they understand. But self-assessment is now allowed for handling non-vital information. So anything not vital to national security. So basically level 2, most people will need a third party to come and assess you. Here's the key, and the thing that gets weird is that basically anybody who's going for a level 2, third-party evaluation will be required. You're going to have to pay somebody to come in, give you the stamp of approval, submit it to the board, and give you the thumbs up. But a subset of them will be, and that's the part that needs the clarity. So basically, the key to know is that if the contract involves information critical to national security, this is what they wrote, the DoD will require the contractor to obtain a third-party assessment from an organization accredited by the CMMC. So basically, if what you're dealing with is top secret or it's a classified part or a piece, you're going to be required to do that. If you're just doing a fire pin in a machine gun, it won't be needed. It's not classified. They can take that apart. They can find themselves. They can get the schematics. There's nothing magical about it. You're not technically in level 1, which is like, hey, I'm making paper clips for the government, but you're technically in level 2. You should have all those controls because what you're producing, how you're producing it is going into something of value, but you don't have to always have a third party. And that's the thing that everybody is still looking for more clarification on. And third party evaluation is still being required for organizations of anything outside of that. So level 3, absolutely, you got to have it. And those third party evaluations are going to be done by the CMMC Third Party Assessment Organization, or what we like to call C3PAOs. CMMC calls it that. I'm convinced that's a nod to Star Wars for C3PO, but C3PAO is really what you need for is somebody to come out and actually give you that stamp of approval. So those, if you're C3PAO, they can test you. Third-party evaluations for level 3, that advanced one, level 5, will be led by government officials themselves, and they'll be coming directly from the Defense Contract Management Agency. So if you're level 3 or level 5, a government official is going to be coming out. You got to do that. If you're level 2 and your requirement of one of those assessments, a C3 PAO is going to come out and do that. If you're level 1, you can self-assess, check the box, and do that, and they reserve the right to come and audit you. That kind of fun. The next was really big about trust. So it was shifting the entire CMMC 2.0 program from under the Secretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment to the DoD's CIO, the Chief Information Officer. So a bunch of new safeguards now are in place. So CMMC 1 lacked a lot of safeguards to prevent some professional and ethical breaches of who's allowed to do what and how that would work. And so the whole point to here is making sure that there are right chains of command, a right amount of information that a C3 PAO can't come out and stamp you that happens to be the buddy and friend of so-and-so, that a government official will come out. Like, that's one of the things they did to implement that trust and put things in between. And so the DOT kind of learned the hard way that a lot of contractors and suppliers weren't actually complying to CMMC or the old DFARS requirements. The other big thing that they're really focusing on with 2.0 is how do we build trust and verify this is actually happening. So 27 of the biggest companies in the defense industry base, they had breaches, and there's over 2,200, I think it's 2,227 breaches, resulting in nearly 5 million stolen records in just 2020. This is 3 years after everybody was supposed to be doing DFARS 800-171. And a large of them, every time they went into it, they weren't following the actual process. So it was really what they were trying to accomplish is that, okay, how can I allow people to self-assess, give them the same levels of controls and everything, and then validate and try to verify that, which is where the scoring mechanism of 2020, that DFARS updated regulation came in, where everybody has been going into the online system and putting in their score from their SSP. So that's really what that was focused about. The other part here was flexibility. So really, they wanted more flexibility in CMMC. There are a lot of things that tick people off, and it was infamous for basically blowing up because you could submit a POAM on the assessment day, and you wouldn't be able to comply, and so you would lose the contract. Or that the most weighted requirements of your SSP, remember that score that goes back and forth, each one of those has a different weight of what is going to happen to your score. And most of those weighted requirements weren't permitted to remain on the POAM at all. You could not have a heavily weighted item on your POAM, you failed, right? Under CMMC, the first version of it, you were basically only given 180 days to fulfill the required base level of standards. That's it, you were cut off. So basically what CMMC 2, the second rendition of it, it provides the ability to have something on your POAM and have a clear ability to get to that compliance levels. It provides defense contractors with some flexibility should they fall short of the compliance at any level. So for example, under certain circumstances, your contractors are going to be permitted to make POAMs to achieve a certification at a certain given time frame. So that could be a year out as long as it was approved. And the reason they were doing this is that how could I be this level if I'm doing this little tiny project to potentially get a larger contract? And so they allowed, okay, we have a mission critical contract, and the government was going against their own regulation and saying, no, that's fine. You don't need to be compliant. We just need you to do this because it was this mission critical, super sensitive work. So they did two major things. One, you can put together a POAM and have certain things in the POAM with a date constraint, but whatever you're putting in there, make sure you hit it. And the second part is that they have a waiver ability, determining on what they want to do to give a waiver to allow the deployment schedule to change or to allow the government to not break their own rules. So that deployment really and waiver ability is new. I wouldn't rely on like, oh, they're just giving me a waiver. They have been pretty specific about making sure that that waiver is only rarely used. And it's really for when they need something mission critical in a part or a certain supplier, and when, so that, again, they don't break their own rules. The other part was speed. So if you've been part of, this is the last item. The last part is speed. A lot of people, again, I think the government thought everybody's following the rules, and so they're like, okay, we expect you to be able to do this in 6 to 9 months. Totally reasonable. If you were following the 800-171 things in the first place, because they only had like 27 other random controls. So because of this, because back to that alignment, now it's only 800-171, it's standard, or it's 800-172, you guys should be following that anyways. They allowed it to be easier to certify. You didn't have to get special CMMC experts or consultants to be able to do, and they were allowed to move far quicker to get the assessment. The other part is that under the first rendition of CMMC, the contractor was only awarded if they had the right certification at the point in time. And because the contractor is now able to attain a waiver for time critical acquisitions, you can kind of get past a lot of that. And you, again, speed, being able to get the products and things they needed when they did. Those waivers are only going to be approved by senior DoD personnel, and they'll have limited time duration as well. But 2.0 all but guarantees faster approvals, project contractor matching across the board. It was all about making sure that the scores that everybody's been submitting are be able to make sure that they're, okay, this is the contract, here's the score, and be able to connect the contractor to the project. It was all about making sure that this is fast. This is really what they were focusing on, to make sure that people can get through the process cost effectively, quickly, remove the confusion, and be able to build through that. Those are the major highlights really for the changes that are coming on. So it's levels 1, 2, and 3, which are basically 1, 3, and 5 equivalents. There is the removement really of those proofs of compliance of how you're following your policies, removing, it was literally probably 50 to 100% extra effort that everybody was expected to go through to make sure that every step and process was being followed. And a lot of that was ripped out to be able to make it more like industry standards of what you would need in a SOC audit or something like that. And then making sure that there were waivers so the government wasn't breaking its own responsibility, and that they basically that you can not have to be 100% compliant right off the bat in order to win the contract. That your POAM later on can actually say, oh, we'll be compliant as of this. And if it's a weighted item, you have to make sure that you hit it, as long as the POAM that you're submitting is deemed accessible for the risk that you're taking on. So those are the key things. Again, I'll open up to questions and further on a little later. What Charles ID does to help, if you're looking to engage, I get a lot of questions after these webinars. Hey, can you help me do this, do that? We're more than happy to help. We actually have an offering. You don't need to have us be your IT provider. We actually offer what we call the CISO, Chief Information Security Officer. And basically what that is allows us to hold your hand, sometimes maybe drag you into compliance to make sure that we're doing all the right things for you all the time. And it's really focused on mitigating business risk. And a lot of the stuff that we'll approach you with is saying, okay, here's everything you need in your business, and this is intelligent to do business-wise, and here's what you really need in your compliance. And people are sometimes confused, well, what's the difference between a CISO offering and what you do? Really, what we're focusing on with a virtual Chief Information Security Officer is talking about your policy, your internal risk assessment, your third-party risk assessment, walking you through day by day what you need to do, and less about implementing the projects and dealing with day-to-day IT support. It's really getting more ingrained into your business process and your organization versus something a little bit more canned. So what our actual offering includes is there's monthly security meetings. So we go through and literally like, okay, here's what we're tackling this month. It's policy. We need to review this, this, and this. We need to run maybe the next month. We're like, okay, this meeting is your internal risk meeting. Here's the agenda. We're reviewing these risks. what's the controls, we're doing all the documentation, we're making sure that all the right people are accounted for and all the right documentation is in place. We also do the security change management. So you technically should have anything that's affecting security go through a change management process. Well, you can outsource that to us instead of you guys trying to build that in. We have the documentation, we have the change management system, we know generally what should get changed and what's not, and we act as this gut check for the organization. Is like, sure, we'll make this change. They don't really know the security implications of doing those changes. We do your ProAm and SSP updates. So your ProAm and SSP updates, when you're enrolled with us, we will give you a monthly update. What's my SSP? What's my score that I'm submitting? Where am I on the ProAm? Are we going to hit the target? Instead of like, oh crap, I forgot about that. Let's brush that off. It's been 4 or 5 months and let's review it now. We do all the policy creation, review, and updates for you. So making sure, a lot of times the biggest lift that we have to do in one of these assessments is there's no written policy, or the written policy is so far out of date that it no longer applies and the organization isn't following it, which is like kiss of death. You want to make sure whatever your policy is doing, you're following, and that's us about reviewing it, creating it, updating to what actually the heck is going on. We also include in that an annual gap assessment and any help that you need to get through an audit. We do the third-party vendor risk assessment, and we'll do that every year for all the third parties involved that you should be doing. The internal risk assessment annually. So what's my internal risk? Like, hey, what happens if the building burns down? What happens if somebody has malicious intent or negligence internally? Like, how do we adapt for these kind of risks? What happens if our largest supplier goes away? We are helping walk through the organization through that and how you mitigate those risks. And then we audit liaison for any investigation or audits for a government agency, the third parties, insurance companies, anything along those lines that come throughout. And so you feel free, you can reach out, and we're more than happy to help you with anything when you're dealing with any compliance, CMMC or SOC 2 or ISO. Those are all things that we're more than happy to guide you and sometimes pull you into compliance. So I think with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jack to see if there's any questions, and I'm more than happy to answer anything I can.
Yeah, thank you, Foster, for a very informative presentation. We know that it's important to know these new changes to CMMC, as we already know how complicated the process can be. So I think that officially brings us to our Q&A, and make sure for all the attendees out there, if you do have any questions, to drop them into the Q&A. And even if we don't get to them today, then Foster will always follow up personally with you. So make sure to get them in. If you have any other questions afterwards that you think of, shoot him an email. His email is going to be on the next slide. So for now, we do have a couple questions here. And the first one looks like it is, what is the process of self-assessing for level 1 and that portion of level 2? So I know we talked about that already, but if you could just provide a little more insight into that.
Sure. So like, what does a self-assessment process look like? The self-assessment process is going to be filling out basically your SSP in your own POAM. So when you have an SSP, it's a system security plan. It has every control, and whether you're implemented it, did not implement it, or it's not applicable. And basically how you answer that, it either adds to your score or removes from your score. So you can be plus or negative a number. So like sometimes you fill it out and we freak people out and you're like, hey, your score is negative 34. People are like, whoa, that sounds bad. That is going through that process and actually scoring through that is what the self-assessment is. And when you get to that score, a lot of times that score is what you're implementing. So there'll be a checkbox, yes, I'm doing X, Y, and Z. And a lot of times at the end of it, they're like, please submit your score. So you're either going to say, yes, I've implemented this, no, I haven't, or it's not applicable, or they might just ask the score. And that's actually how you go through it. So it's literally every single control. And they're like, okay, do you have endpoint, do you have encryption in place at rest and in transit? And you're like, yes, this is implemented. Great. And the password policy, acceptable use, yes, implemented. No, it's not. And then that's how you self-assess.
Awesome. Thank you for giving us an answer there. The other question we have here looks like it's what is the timing for the rollout of CMMC 2.0? Will companies still need to comply with CMMC 1.0 for now?
So, great question. CMMC 1.0, you don't need to comply with 1.0. This is the revision. And again, the whole alignment aspect, that core page that I had on alignment, is really about what you need to do is comply with NIST 800-171 control set. You have to follow that. And technically, everybody should have been following that for years. So that is technically what you need to be compliant for. The second part of that question is, okay, well, when do I need to be compliant with it? Well, 2.0 came out in November, and basically it has to go through rules, and I can get into the technical explanation of it, but basically they have to go through rule setting and before it is like officially set as law and how that works. That will probably take 6 to 9 months to kind of go through that process, and then maybe another 12 months to be able to iterate everything. Once that is there, they will start requiring it in contracts. CMMC, the first rendition, was basically they were predicting by 2025, 2026 that all contracts will have it. And they were slowly going to scale out DFARS clauses and increase the CMMC requirements. So like as those things fell out of contract, now it's instead of DFARS, you're going to have a CMMC level 2 requirement. What they're predicting is that, okay, 2026, but it's just going to very quickly scale just faster. They're going to make that shift way faster. No, but they haven't officially released a timeline, but the board consistently is always held to a 5-year rollout from when they implement in 2020, and they have yet to see change those dates. They say it's late 2025, early 2026, but you haven't really seen them shift more than 6 months.
Great, thank you, Foster. And I think that wraps up our questions as of now. So like I said before, if anyone in the audience today has any more questions, feel free to drop them in this Q&A before the event ends in a few minutes here, or feel free to shoot Foster an email. He's always pretty good about answering his emails, so you don't have to worry about anything there. So that brings us to our final thoughts page. So, I mean, I just want to give Foster an opportunity here to leave you guys with some final thoughts, maybe some major takeaways from this presentation. And here's all our contact information. So, Foster, I'll leave it to you.
Yeah. So feel free to email me directly. I usually get a couple of emails after this, random questions, clarification, that kind of stuff. So feel free to. The biggest thing is I can leave with is I have a reasonable number of people that come to me is like, CMMC is never going to get applied. The defense industry base is not going to stop producing stuff, and the government's not going to stop buying stuff. But they've held pretty strong to basically what this is, and they're expecting to those who have the certifications. If you don't have it, and you don't have a POAM, or you haven't even done the right stuff or shown the effort, they're going to go to the next person in line that has done the effort. If you don't have a POAM or SSP at the time of award, and that POAM isn't accurate or right, they're going to move on. And so there is going to be an actual advantage to organizations who early adopt, especially in the first year, while people start losing contracts, and then very quickly they're expecting people to move up because of what they just changed as far as cost, implementation, people being able to self-assess, and they're like, okay, give me the score, give me some basic evidence, great, it's done, and they're going to move on. So just make sure that you're actually following up. Follow 800-171. You guys should be doing it since 2016. Actually go through that and be on the conservative side and figure out where you stand for it. If you are dealing with anything that is classified or a part in it, something classified of like a new jet fighter or a weapon or anything in the nuclear division, like those things are absolutely going to be level 3. You are not getting away from it. They require audits and things to be applied, and if you're hunting at one of those things, you can't. I've had 1 or 2 people like, no, we'll be fine, and I've actually had one client not get the contract for that. So take it seriously. the best words of advice I can provide.
Yeah, absolutely. And plus, it'll protect your company in the long run. So
Yeah,
it gives you a framework to follow. Anyway, I think that wraps up our presentation for today. So again, thank you, Foster, for all the information on the new update of CMMC. And we want to thank all of you guys for joining us today. I know that it was a middle of the day kind of thing here, but we appreciate all of you joining us, and we will see you next time. Take care.